To understand the final warning, we go back to the first sighting. First contact, the impossible hold. They briefed it like a Tuesday. Weather over the range looked ugly, sea level ducting, layers that bent radar beams like mirrors. Standard rules of engagement, emissions control, nothing exotic. He noted the fuel plan twice because ducting can keep you chasing ghosts. He didn't know the ghost would be waiting. On climb out, the radio had that clean, metallic confidence that settles you into the seat. The flight lead joked about chow. His wingman chewed on a pen and ran the same checks he always ran, callouts clipped and automatic. Then the controller voice shifted. Fast mover, Bulls 270, Angels 24, stationary relative. Stationary and fast in the same sentence didn't compute. He rolled to pick up the radar picture and let the pod slide onto the mark. There was not a bird, not a balloon. No tumble, no drift. It held like it had bitten into the sky. Wind was howling from the west at 120 knots, high shear. The white caps below skittered sideways. This thing didn't care. Heart rate spiked. He felt the tightness come into his breath and switched to the breathing drill they'd drilled 1,000 times. In 6, hold 2 out 6. Hands settled, eyes up. Merge plot came fast. The blip didn't grow, it flickered. The HUD tried to make sense, velocity vectors jumped, then steadied on nothing. 2 tally? The wingman's banter stopped mid-syllable, a mic click and silence. The flight lead cut the humor. Stay wide. I'll press. You can hear when someone's voice gets shorter. It got shorter. He eased forward line, let the pod attempt a lock. The crosshairs drifted like they were on oil. An angle off that should have been simple turned slippery. The pod did what it does when it can't believe its own math. It yawed through and hunted. Lock, lock, break lock, he heard himself say. The object snapped from 24,000 to wave top in the time it took the word break to leave his mouth. No pressure wave. No sonic crack. Just a vanishing and a reappearing. And the ocean didn't even flinch. Training says don't chase the hole in your thinking. He checked fuel, checked altitude, checked separation. The controller sounded like someone reading a script underwater. Skin paint intermittent. Possible clutter. Clutter doesn't hold stationary against 100-knot wind. Clutter doesn't drop to the deck and park. He asked the simple question. Request continue intercept. Command came back calm as a surgeon. Continue mission. That answer felt like someone had pressed a thumb on the back of his neck. The squadron on frequency went quiet in a way that makes you aware of your own breath. He chose to bracket it, hold altitude, and watch. He wasn't going to dive into a problem he couldn't describe. Then the ocean lit, just a hair brighter where it sat, like a heat mirage doing the wrong thing. He slipped the jet left, kept the object off the nose, and called his wingman to move high cover. No reply at first, then a single word. Visual. The lead's voice came back clipped. Knock it off, reset. And the word knock ended the practice. They were out of the scenario, and into whatever this was. Fuel started to matter. They'd burned a clean plan into a dirty sky. If they chased low, they'd eat into bingo. He weighed it. Intercept and risk a tanker scramble, or hold, and bring home a clean record. The brief had been about not making a mess. The air did it for them. He watched the object slip along the wave tops without touching them. In the pod, there was a bloom where the crosshairs thought heat should be, then a smudge as if the software was correcting for something it didn't recognize. He wanted the sound of a boom, just to tell him the world still had rules. It didn't come. His wingman finally found words. This isn't right. That was the last joke they'd tell for the next 2 hours. Command asked for an update, voice even. He gave them words that felt like twine. Object stationary against winds, altitude variable, pod unable to maintain stable track. The lead added a fuel state, suggested reset. Approval slid back across the air, like an official stamp. He climbed, set a course away from the puzzle, and watched it with the corner of his eye. It stayed. It didn't chase, didn't pulse, didn't act like anything with wings. What got him wasn't the drop. It was the stillness, the way it refused the wind. He'd spent a life reading air, how it curls off a wingtip, how it bites at the canopy. This was a hole where air should have been. On the way home, checklist cadence came back. He spoke it like a prayer. The wingman said nothing for a full minute. When he finally did, he said, "We're not writing that up like that." He felt a small crack run through the trust he kept with physics and procedure. He was already editing a future he hadn't lived yet. Back aboard, the noise of the deck washed the sky out of him for a second. Then the crew chief asked a question with his eyebrows. He gave a version that didn't sound like a joke. The chief's face didn't change, but he made a note. Down below, sailors would log an intermittent track that didn't behave like rain. He walked into the ready room and tasted the stale coffee smell like it was new. The flight lead closed the door with his foot. "We'll keep it clean," he said. That meant they'd write what the book liked. Not a lie, just something the book could digest. He nodded because he wasn't ready to argue with a book. That night, his hands practiced switches in the air over his kitchen table. His kid had a homework packet and asked why clouds look like mountains at sunset. He said something about angles and dust. He didn't say he'd watched an object ignore a 100-knot wind like it had a private treaty with the sky. He lay down and trusted his training to put him to sleep. It didn't. He replayed the drop, trying to hear a boom that never came. He listened for vortex rings, for anything that fit. Silence answers with more silence. In the morning, they briefed another intercept. Weather had shifted. The talk turned to refueling windows and radio procedures. He sat a little straighter than usual. When the controller voice came through the wall again from the neighboring room, the hairs rose on his arms. He pressed his thumb against the table edge until it hurt. Pain is a fine anchor. While the sky went quiet, the ground had already started to hum. Down in the Combat Information Center, sailors argued with the spy console about what counts as a track. In maintenance, someone wrote anomalous behavior with a pencil and erased it, then wrote intermittent return instead. Language learned how to step around the hole. He didn't know any of that yet. He only knew that a still point had opened in the air and swallowed a rule he'd lived by. He was going to fly again, and he was going to bring that crack with him. The radar that wouldn't lie, until it did. While he taxied in, the ship had already started its quiet argument with reality. In CIC, the spy operators were juggling returns that came and went like bad conscience. Fast movers at impossible velocities, then nothing, then a smear that leapt 30 miles in a sweep. The senior operator pinned a strip on the plot board anyway. You log what you see, or you stop being useful. On deck, he walked his report to maintenance. The crew chief flipped through the forms and pointed with a grease-black fingernail. Pod drift? He nodded. At Fleur attempted lock, angle off inconsistent, break lock events. The chief wrote, paused, and replaced the phrase anomalous behavior with intermittent stabilization. Words matter, especially when they'll be read by people who weren't there. Down below, controllers were speaking carefully. Skin pain intermittent, the air intercept controller said, keeping the word bug out of his mouth. Skin pain is supposed to be the truth, the raw reflection from a thing that is actually there, not just software hallucination. When skin goes intermittent on a clear day, your stomach finds a new gravity. The ship's log began to fill with small hedges, ducting, sea clutter, chaff from training evolutions. Meanwhile, the Et Fleur techs ran their checklist like a legal deposition. Gimbal limits? Inspec. Gyros? Fine. Calibration? Verified. They piped a test image and watched the pod lock and track like it was born for it. No defects noted. The tech initialed the line and looked up at him with a neutral face that said, "The gear's good. If it's not the gear, it's the world." He sat with the tapes. The pod footage showed crosshairs, sliding like a finger on a fogged window. The object's aspect should have given the algorithm something to bite. Instead, the pod danced a half step behind, as if the target kept moving just outside the predictive model. He'd been taught about Kalman filters and how the software guesses the next frame of motion. This thing kept stepping off the guesses, like it knew where the math would land and refused to be there. In radio recordings, he heard his own voice go up half a note. He also heard the gap when the wingman didn't answer, a small, ugly silence that only pilots recognize. He rewound it twice, then closed his eyes. The room hummed with the ship's heartbeat and the air conditioner that always sounded like rain. Controllers held a scrub meeting that afternoon. The lead operator ran through the timeline. At time 12:31 Zulu, spy detects a high-altitude stationary contact, bearing 270 at 90 miles. Intermittent returns, variable SNR. Subsequent tracks exhibit rapid displacement between sweeps. A junior asked about false tracks due to anomalous propagation. The lead didn't blink. We ran the algorithm. Some AP indicated, but not consistent with the displacement. Could it be jamming? Another voice offered. The EW officer shook his head. No associated emissions. Nothing on the spectrum we monitor. If it's messing with us, it's doing it quietly. Quiet jamming felt like saying a shadow was loud. He took the Et Fleur pod list to the shop. One tech rubbed his forehead. We've seen this once. Pod loses stable lock when target maintains 0 aspect changes, while moving laterally beyond predicted rate. The software expects a rotation, some parallax. It got nothing. He thanked him and walked the passageway, hand brushing the cold pipe, cataloging the ship's smells. Diesel, sweat, citrus cleaner, salt. The normal world asserting itself. In the ready room, the tape made its first unofficial appearance. A few seconds of the lock-in break on a training reel meant to show common tracking pitfalls. Laughter, mostly to bleed off the pressure. Look at that, it jukes like it owes money. He forced a grin. Behind the jokes, eyes stayed on the frames longer than usual. Someone paused and stepped closer. Back it up! The banter slowed, then stopped. You could feel the room decide not to decide. He filed a write-up that avoided certainty. Observed object displayed hold against forecast winds, rapid altitude change without associated acoustic or visible aerodynamic signatures. Sensor behavior inconsistent with known failure modes. He left space for the maintenance notes. He left out the part where his chest tightened. There's no field for that. Up the chain, the note drew exactly the amount of attention he'd hoped to avoid. A staffer added a line. No further action at this time. It looked bureaucratic and harmless. It felt like a door with a deadbolt on the inside. The message, "We see you, we're not touching this. Keep flying." Meanwhile, word crept. Hangar talk travels faster than a memo because it's carried by people who need to say it out loud to make it real. A controller who'd watched the track blink off and on told a buddy in ordnance during a smoke break. It outran the sweep. The buddy laughed, then asked for details, then went quiet and changed the subject. He took another look at the spy printouts. The tracks made a constellation you couldn't name. Jumps that didn't smear like radar errors usually do. No hooks, no scallops, just point-to-point relocations that made the map look like a child's connect-the-dots drawn by someone who hated lines. He traced it with his finger, feeling foolish and compelled. That night, the Itfleur shop chief found him by the soda machine. "We rear-end calibration. Pod's clean. If anyone asks, that's the line because it's the truth." He nodded. The chief dropped his voice. "For what it's worth, I saw the frames. Gear did what it could. It wasn't comfort, but it was company." He pulled flight data from the jet. Angle of attack, G, airspeed, pitch, roll, yaw. The numbers told a boring story. His jet behaved. The weirdness wasn't in his hands. That matters to pilots. If the ghost is in you, you can attack it. If it's outside, you start checking long-held beliefs for cracks. On the bridge, a junior officer asked the captain whether to file a safety advisory. The captain stared at the horizon for 3 beats. "We'll log it. We won't alarm." He didn't say don't. He didn't have to. By the second day, the problem had a shape. Sensors that rarely agreed all agreed on something they couldn't hold. Radar saw and didn't. Infrared bit and slipped. Radio logs captured normal voices saying abnormal things. And the maintenance forms that usually read like a lullaby picked up a thread of careful language that stretched across departments. When he stepped into CIC the next watch, a new return had popped 30 miles north, then vanished before the next sweep. The operator kept his hands flat on the console. "Sir, we get yelled at for chasing angels. We also get yelled at for missing threats. Today's a both day." He stood behind him and watched the green phosphor breathe. He wrote himself a note. Trust the instruments until you can't, then trust your eyes until you shouldn't, then trust your training to bring you home. It sounded like something you'd put on a classroom wall. It didn't fix the part where the world had shrugged at the rules. By evening, the official word was unchanged, no further action. Unofficially, a new story was taking on weight, the kind that bends conversations. Guys who'd called balloons by their first. Names started sitting straighter when the tape rolled. The words skin paint intermittent became shorthand for the way certainty dies. The day ended with him in a chair, staring at a still frame where the crosshairs almost held. He thought about the software predicting where a target would be, and the target refusing to be predicted. He thought about his breathing drill and how it worked on heart rate, but not on doubt. He closed the laptop and listened to the ship settle. The tape wouldn't stay quiet. It never does. The debrief that changed his name. They put him in the small secure room with the beige walls and the single humming vent that always made the ceiling feel lower. The intelligence officer walked in with a legal pad he didn't intend to fill. "Just the facts," he said, and the tone said, "Keep it small." The recorder's red light came on. He felt his mouth go dry, like his body was trying to hide the words. He started with the timeline. Launch at 12:09, intercept window 12:30. Controller calls stationary contact 24000. The intel officer raised a finger. Use UAP for the contact. He nodded. UAP stationary relative to high winds. Another finger. Avoid vehicle. We aren't characterizing. He edited in real time, trimming words that might later be used to cut him. He described the hold against the wind, the drop, the brake lock. Pod behavior inconsistent with known failure modes. The officer leaned forward. Say pod did not maintain lock. He swallowed the difference. Precision mattered, but so did survival. The gray-haired Master Chief in the corner watched him like he was reading a gauge. Any acoustic signatures? No. Any visible propulsion? No. Any emissions on EW? Negative. The officer's pen didn't move. Weather anomalies? Ducting. Not consistent with displacement observed. He could hear himself slipping into clean, careful phrasing, the language of trying not to step on mines. Then the officer did the tilt he'd been waiting for. Is it possible fatigue contributed? He'd flown long cycles before and never misread the wind's hand. Possible? Sure. Likely? No. The officer nodded as if that settled something. It settled nothing. Keep this out of the log if it's noise, the officer said offhand, like he was talking about coffee grounds. We don't want to clutter the system. There was a career hint sitting right under the sentence like a tripwire. The Master Chief's eyes flicked to him and away. He heard a second voice in his head. Protect the crew. He edited mid-sentence. He cut out the part where his wingman went silent for a beat that meant fear. He left the human out and kept the numbers in. Crew cohesion intact, he said, and hated how it sounded. The officer nodded, finally letting the pen scratch. Good. We avoid speculation. Speculation was a synonym for the thing that can ruin you. They compared his sanitized account to the maintenance draft. Where he'd said inconsistent, the shop had said intermittent. Where he'd said hold against winds, the shop wrote stationary relative. He knew the game. Triangulate the safest version and call it truth. He placed his handwritten flight notes on the table, the ones he'd scribbled minutes after shutdown, shaky lines, real words. The officer looked at them and asked, "Do you need to retain those?" He heard the subtext. "Do you intend to keep a copy?" He slid them back into his folder. For accuracy, the officer's expression didn't change, which was an expression in itself. He was asked to draw a sketch. He drew the ocean, the altitude bands, the object's positions, dots without lines because the lines implied continuity and continuity implied physics. The officer tapped the wavetop dot. "You're certain?" He remembered the absence of a boom, the way the water didn't ripple. Certainty felt like a costume, but he wore it. "Yes." "Recommend course of action?" the officer asked, routine words that felt ceremonial. He said the only thing he could say that didn't throw anyone under a bus. Safety advisory regarding range intrusions. Request additional sensor coverage. The officer wrote note range safety and left out intrusions. Language was a hedge fund. Then the word games turned sharper. Did you feel threatened? If he said yes, they could call him excitable. If he said no, they could call it inconsequential. He split the hair. Potential collision risk existed. The officer smiled, small, professional. It was the smile of a file growing teeth. The Master Chief finally spoke, voice like gravel. "You're not the first to see weird. You won't be the last. Keep it in the lane and you'll be fine." It sounded like advice. It also sounded like a boundary. He nodded, because not nodding would be a choice with a price tag. The officer clicked off the recorder and shifted into a warmer register. "Off the record, if this is noise, let's not feed it. People get reputations." He heard the capital. Letters. Reputations travel faster than facts and stick longer. He didn't say anything. Silence is its own checkbox. They released him back into the brighter corridors, where the fluorescent lights hummed at exactly the wrong frequency for thinking. Two aviators leaned near the water fountain and went quiet when he turned the corner. One of them glanced at his name patch and looked away fast. In units like this, names morph. By dinner, he heard the first version of his new one under someone's breath. That pilot. Not the ace, not the reliable section lead. That pilot. You never want to be that anything. He sat in the ready room and watched the debrief tapes roll for another flight, familiar radio calls, clean intercepts, the comfort of everything looking like it should. The Squadron XO walked in, rested a hand on the back of his chair, and left it there a second too long. "Keep it tight," the XO said. It meant more than formation spacing. He opened his notebook and compared the sanitized report to his notes. In his notes, object refused wind. In the report, contact stationary. In his notes, pod hunts target beyond model. In the report, pod did not maintain lock. Both were true. Only one would keep a career from fraying. He called his wingman and got voicemail. He stared at the phone like it might offer a compromise. When the wingman called back later, the first words were, "We good." He said, "We're good." Neither of them believed it. The wingman added, "I'm not going to be the guy." He didn't ask which guy. He knew. Next morning, he was scheduled to fly again. He walked the line and felt the jet like you feel an old friend's mood. The plane smelled like fuel and warmed metal. He strapped in and heard the crew chief's voice through the comm panel. "You good?" He said yes. Nobody asked different. On startup, the tower voice used his call sign with the neutral tone that means the speaker knows things and won't say them. He taxied with the small correction taps you use when you want to prove to yourself you're still smooth. He was. Skill wasn't the question anymore. In the climb, he realized the label had come aboard with him. It sat where confidence usually Saturday that pilot rode along, uninvited and extra weight. He checked himself in the mirror on the left canopy rail and saw somebody who looked like him but thought about wind like it had secrets. The mission was uneventful. He flew it by the book and shaved none of the corners. Back down, the XO nodded once. A tech from at Fleur walked past and didn't meet his eyes. The Master Chief caught his sleeve in the passageway and said, "Low. Write what you saw. Don't write what you think." He heard the compassion under the caution. He returned to the secure room for a signature. The intel officer slid the sanitized report across. He read it twice. It was accurate in the way a map is accurate. It showed the roads and left out the hills. He signed. The officer capped his pen. "Will mark no further action." The words were supposed to soothe. They sounded like an epitaph. He left with a new name pinned to him that he hadn't chosen. In a community where your call sign is a story and your story is currency, the exchange rate had shifted. The label followed him out to the flight line, into the next brief, into the small pauses when conversations fracture around a subject that feels like heat. It would follow him farther than he thought. Night flights and silent panic. He tried to treat the next cycle like any other. Pre-flight at dusk, lineup briefing, a clean plan.